Well, I have to sit. I had back surgery in 2013, and it took away a lot of my pain, but it didn't take it all away. So I can't stand for long periods of time, and I can't walk long distances. That's why I have to sit. So I maybe should have explained that a while back, but that's why it is. But thanks for being here this morning. I appreciate you being here, and God appreciates you being here also. The title of my sermon this morning is, How Can You Help the Church Grow? How can you help the church grow? Back in the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy, in one of his speeches, set a vision before America. He said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one which we intend to win." Within that decade, NASA succeeded in sending a ship into space that orbited and sent a lunar lander to the surface of the moon. For the first time, man set foot on a celestial body other than Earth. Now, nearly 60 years later, America has a new dream and a new vision. They've been working on it because I've been keeping an eye on it. They want to send a manned landing craft to the planet Mars within the next few years. Now, they've been working on it, but obviously it's a large undertaking, a huge undertaking. The orbits of the Earth and Mars are so different that the Mars only comes close enough to the Earth every 2 years for them to actually go to it. And even then, at our present rate of speed in space, it would be roughly an 8-month trip. That also means that once a human crew reached Mars, they would have to wait 2 years before they could return. So it would take 8 months to get there, 8 months to get back, and roughly 2 years waiting for an opportunity to make the return trip. That's about 3.5 years. That's really a long time, and it's a very dangerous and complicated mission. Of course, they're not going to do that for a while because they have a lot of things they have to set up. I heard the other day that they were going to try to get something set up on the moon so they could go from there to Mars, is what they were trying to do. With that all said, they had a mission, and they still have a mission. They have a mission of going to Mars. It sounds like it's far-fetched. My mother told me when I was a kid, they're probably going to send a man to the moon in your lifetime. And they did. And that brings us to our story this morning. Today we're going to study about 4 men who were on a mission that is found in the text that Ryan read for us. Mark 2, 1 through 5, if you'd like to turn there. I'm going to paraphrase this. Their friend was paralyzed, and these men were convinced that Jesus could heal him. Now, this is the first year of Jesus' ministry. Ever since the Sermon on the Mount, he's been out preaching, teaching, and healing. And it seemed that every time people knew he was in the area, they'd surround him. They'd literally mob him. And you could understand why, because if you had any ailment whatsoever, the one woman even said, if I could just touch his garment, I'll be healed. So you could understand why he would be mobbed that way. And now Jesus has come to Capernaum, and again he's surrounded by the crowd. In fact, he's teaching inside a house, and it is packed with people. And I mean packed. And there this paralytic friend, as we read this story, you almost sense the desperation and urgency in their actions for their friend. They have got to get in to see Jesus. They don't want to wait. They won't put it off, because if they wait, they might miss him. They've got to see Jesus. They can't risk Jesus getting away again before their friend had a chance to be touched by Jesus and healed. And here they're finally caught up with him again. But they can't get through the crowd. It's an impossibility. There's no room in the house. They can't get close to the door. They can't even get close to the windows because of the crowd. Now just imagine a house being packed so full that you couldn't even crawl in through a window. There's no room in the house. People are crowding the doors and they are blocking the windows, as I said. How are we going to get in there? Just wonder how you would do that if you were confronted with that. Then one of them looks over at the house and says, well, there's nobody up on the roof. And everybody looks at him in surprise because they all know what he's thinking. I wonder if we could dig a hole in the roof, then we could let him down in front of Jesus. Another friend scoffs. But we can't just drop him through the hole. How are we going to lower him safely to the floor? Still a third says if we had ropes, maybe we could lower him down through the roof. Yeah, ropes would work. Why don't we get some ropes? And off they go in search of ropes to use for their friend. Now you have to realize this is a bold move on their part. I mean, they're going to destroy a roof of a house that they don't own. It's owned by someone else. They're going to disrupt a session being taught by Jesus himself. In fact, they're going to be barging into a meeting of some very important people. But the paralytic's friends don't care. They don't care if they ruin the roof. They don't care if they upset the meeting. And they don't care who's there in the house with Jesus. All they care is they have a friend who's sick and Jesus can heal him. Nothing else matters. They are on a mission, just as I mentioned about NASA having a mission. And they will not waver because they're determined to reach their objective because their friend needs Jesus. So they get up on the roof. Now remember, they didn't only lower him down, they had to heave him up with the ropes onto the roof first. And then they had to dig a hole in the roof. So they find the roof, they find him, they get him up on the roof, they tear away at the towel and the branches and the plaster and reeds that form the roof. And you can see the crowd as the debris from the room begins to, the dust from the digging seems to fill the room. They clamber to their feet and struggle to get out of the way. And you even may hear the owner of the house saying, "Hey, wait a minute, that's my roof you're destroying." But they continue because they're on a mission. And there on the floor in front of Jesus is enough space for the sick man on a pallet. The room is quiet. The crowd just completely silent now. Sunlight streaming down from the hole in the roof. And you can see particles of dust hanging in the air. And the room would probably be filled with haze. And then the stream of light is blocked as the friends swing the pallet over the hole and they begin to lower the friend into the room. And there's Jesus standing, watching quietly until the paralyzed man lays on the floor in front of him. And he then looks up and he sees the anxious faces peering down through the hole in the ceiling. And this is probably the very most important part of the story. Jesus sees their faith. He sees their faith. Now hold that thought. Think about that for a minute. They had so much faith that they did all this for this man. One thing I like about the congregation here is that we talk about church growth a lot and things that we're doing to spread the gospel. And just think about that for a moment. When you became baptized and you read Acts and you read what we call the Great Commission, that's not just for the preacher or the elders or the deacons. That's for everyone in this room. We are commissioned to spread the gospel. And do you realize the great adventure that God has for us? Think about every friend, every relative, and every acquaintance you come in contact with. And God will prepare us if we allow Him so that we can spread the gospel. In Ephesians 2:10 it reads, "For we are His workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them." At one point in His ministry, Jesus tells the disciples in John 14:12, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me, the works that I do, he will do also. And greater works than these he will do, because I go to my Father." God has a grand adventure for us. He is preparing us to do mighty things. But what is this grand adventure? This mighty thing that we can do in His name? There is no mightier and greater thing that you can do in your life that is valued by God more than the act of bringing someone to Jesus. Like these four men did with their friend. Jesus said, "There is a joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Likewise, I say to you, there is joy in the presence of angels. Or we could think of it this way. The angels throw a big party every time a lost soul comes to God. I like that. I like that way of thinking of it. That they're celebrating. When someone comes up out of that water of baptism, the angels are celebrating. They're throwing a party in heaven. So knowing that, can you imagine the anticipation that occurs in heaven every time you bring someone to church or Bible study? Or talk to them out in public about Jesus? The angels would know that this would be the first step that you're taking to bring someone to repentance and accepting Christ and baptism. Somebody did a study sometimes back of the people in the New Testament that Jesus healed. Over the 40 people that they studied that Jesus healed, 34 were either brought to Jesus by their friends or they were taken to Him. In the other 6 cases of the 40, they were the only ones that came to Jesus without any kind of assistance. 6 people out of the 40. Now think about that for a minute. People were brought to Jesus to be healed. They were invited. They weren't invited, they were brought. They were physically taken by the hand and brought to Jesus. Now I know with this COVID thing that we don't have a lot of activities. We're having a dinner today. So we don't have a lot of things like we used to be able to invite people or bring people. But sometimes we use everything that happens as an excuse not to speak to people about Jesus. We're starting to get back to those activities. As I mentioned, we're having one today. But we can't give up. We still have an obligation to spread the gospel. Oh, those people will say, yeah, I like you, and they're going to come, but they don't. And why don't they come? Well, because nobody brings them. It was once said, a church that is waiting for sinners to visit their building is like the police station over here waiting for the criminals to walk through their door. Not going to happen. Now I want to remind you of the 4 friends and what they were willing to do. They got him on the roof. They destroyed the roof. They disrupted a Bible class. In fact, they barged into a meeting of some very important people. Why would they do that? They did it because they had faith. They had faith that Jesus could heal their friend and help their friend. In fact, we're told, as I mentioned, I told you to hold that thought. Jesus saw their faith. It was their faith that Jesus could make a difference that drove them to overcome inconvenience, embarrassment, and all kinds of obstacles. Now, I'm going to say something here that may be offensive, but it's still true. Do you know why a lot of people don't bring their friends, family, neighbors to church? Why they don't talk to people about Jesus? Why they don't think about praying for others to become Christians? Why? Because they don't really have faith that Jesus can change people's lives. You see, we all live in an, I'm dating myself here, we all live in an Andy of Mayberry world, you know? Andy Griffith, Andy, Barney, and Aunt Bee. You know, everybody was just nice and pleasant, good neighbors, loving people. A couple of episodes even showed them in church. But one of the things you will never see in any of those episodes, never once, in that entire show did they ever mention the name of Jesus. Why? Because they didn't need Jesus. They had Andy. And that's pretty much how people live their lives in the real world. Everybody they know is just fine without Jesus. So why bother taking them or talking to them about that or taking them to church? They don't have faith that Jesus can make any difference, so we don't try. And I say we because we all could step it up as far as talking about Jesus. I'm going to give you an illustration. There was a church that had a church bus. They owned it. It was paid off. But they had a problem. They couldn't use it to pick up people because the circuit board went bad, and that circuit board ran the air conditioning and allowed the doors to open and close automatically for passengers. Well, you know, if you can't open the doors on a bus, you're surely not going to pick up people, right? So they bought a new circuit board and found that none of their mechanics could fix the problem. They had to contact the representative of the company who made the circuit board to come and install it. And the tech couldn't come to make the repairs for a couple of weeks. Now you could get in the bus through the back door and drive it all through town. It was a fine billboard because the name was on the front, the side, the back. But you weren't able to accomplish the mission that the bus was built for, and that mission was to pick up people to bring them to church. Now, did they have a bus? Yeah, they had a bus. Did they have the circuit board? Yeah, they had a circuit board. Did they have the money to fix the bus? Yes, they even had that. Then why can't they use it? Why? Because they didn't have the right person to fix the bus. And until they get that person, the bus will be worthless to them. Others might think it does its job because as it's parked there, you think, well, that's pretty nice. They got a bus, they can go pick people up. But the people of the church know they can't do it. In the same way, there are people out there who are driving their lives down the road, and for all intents and purposes, it looks like everything is the way it should be. How many times have you tried to talk to one of your relatives about God and they'll just tell you they're okay? I'm okay. I don't need to hear that. Try to talk to my older brother. He said, Doug, I know you're a preacher, but please don't preach to me. It's hard to sit across from someone that does that. It's hard to be rejected, and that's sometimes why we don't do our job as good as we should. But we have to remember that if they're without Jesus, they may look normal like the bus did, but they're broken and damaged. They may have the money and the resources to have a wonderful life and think that they're just doing great, but something is missing, or rather, someone is missing. They lack one person who can fix what is wrong in their lives. They don't have Jesus. But we do. And we should be trying to convey that to other people. And believe me, it's hard. We spent a day at the fair yesterday in the booth. And I'm going to do a sermon on left turns. Because we was on the right. And every time they came around the corner and seen Church of Christ, they made a left turn. Went across the aisle, went over, then made another right turn, and then made another left turn and walked on by. And really, it scares me. It really does. Because we have to think about the urgency of this. Because if we don't get to them, if we don't get it across to them, we don't at least try to deliver it to them, they're lost. And we have to do that. But the problem in the lives of people around us is it's not obvious to them that they need religion. In fact, I've had a conversation with Greg yesterday. I asked him how religion came so irrelevant. I shouldn't say big words if I can't pronounce them. How did it do that? How did Satan make it so irrelevant? When I was a kid, I bet you there was only one family in the whole neighborhood that didn't get out of bed on Sunday morning and go to church. And now, I could go down 10 or 15 city blocks and they'd be out in the backyard playing or sleeping in bed or watching TV or playing video games or whatever. And the idea is we have to make sure that we make it relevant. Now, I want your participation in this next part now that you can wake up from your nap. Because in a few minutes we're going to go eat. So you want to be wide awake for that, okay? I'm going to ask you a particular question, and I want you to repeat after me. Will you go with me to this church? Can you say it with me? Will you go with me to this church? Now I'm going to ask you as an audience to participate in the sermon just one more time, so I make sure that you're awake, okay? I want to make sure that you're awake and you enjoy the meal, okay? Will you go with me to this church? Will you go with me to this church? Now I want to put the emphasis on go, okay? Now I want to put the emphasis on with. Will you go with me to this church? Will you go with me to this church? Okay, then I want you to put an emphasis on me. Will you go with me to this church? Will you go with me to this church? Now see how easy that is? I didn't even go to college for 4 years and be trained to even get you to do that kind of stuff. You just did it automatically. Isn't that great? It's really wonderful, isn't it? Now allow me to use an illustration that shows what I'm talking about. We have a professional basketball team here in Cleveland. It's called it's called Cavaliers. They're a pretty good team. They won a championship. And a lot of people buy tickets to go see them. Now, I'm not into basketball that much, but what would actually make me go? What would actually make me go? What would entice me? Well, if you came to me and said, hey, Doug, I got tickets to the game. I already bought them. I'll give you a ticket. You don't have to pay anything for the ticket. And even afterwards, I'll take you out to eat and I'll pay for it. Well, if anybody knows anything about me, if it's a free meal, I'm in. Then, I might go with you. Now, if it came to the opera, I don't know anything about the opera. Same thing pertains. If it's another free meal, I'll probably go with you. If you have to, wash their car, mow their grass, or take them out for a meal. I have actually told people that. I was talking to a lady at Sam's Club that we got to know pretty well, and I invited her to church, and I told her, I said, you bring your family, I said, you come to church and I'll take you out to lunch afterwards. But see, sometimes we know everything about everything, but when it comes to religion, we don't even know the basics on what we should be doing. I used this analogy before, but it really fits in. There was a young salesman that had just lost a major sale. He'd really counted on this contract, but it fell through and he was really upset. So he called up a friend of his father's who was a marketing manager of a large business and shared his frustrations with him. He was looking for guidance and maybe just a shoulder to cry on. In the course of the conversation, the young man said to him, "I guess you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink." And the marketing manager smiled at him and said, "Son, your job is not to make him drink. It's to make him thirsty." And sometimes we don't even get to the part about making them thirsty. My point is this. We have Jesus. Most people here in the audience are with Jesus. You have what your friends and your neighbors and your loved ones need. But the only way that they're going to get it is through you. And I have to just put in one point too. It's your example also. Your example. We just moved into a new apartment building. The people that smoke outside, they know when we're coming out on Sunday morning, we're going to church. When we come out on Sunday night, we're going to church. And when we come out on Wednesday night, we're going to church. That's your example. Letting them know that this is important to you. Because believe me, this is important to God. The lesson is yours this morning. If you have a need to come forward for any reason, we can help you with it. Please come as we stand and sing.